Kira Moonwhisper stood at the edge of the crystal cliffs and watched the human ships descend through the purple clouds of her homeworld, and she had never seen anything so ugly in her 200 years of life because elven ships were made of living crystal that sang as they flew, but these human vessels were all metal and fire and noise. Her dragon Luna landed beside her with scales that shimmered like moonlight on water, and her other dragon Blaze followed right after, with his red and gold coloring bright against the evening sky. And both dragons were curious about the newcomers because they had never seen humans before either. The Elven Council had called an emergency meeting, and Kira knew she had to attend even though she hated politics because her position as Master Dragon Trainer meant she had responsibilities whether she liked them or not. And she climbed onto Luna's back while Blaze took flight beside them. They flew toward the capital city where the great crystal towers rose high into the clouds, and Kira could see hundreds of other elves heading toward the council chamber. And the whole thing felt wrong, because elves never rushed, but today everyone seemed worried. The dark forces from beyond the rim had destroyed 3 colony worlds in the past month, and the invasion fleets were getting closer every day. And the elven military had been fighting alone for 50 years because they thought they were superior to all other species, but now they were losing. Kira landed in the dragon courtyard and dismissed Luna and Blaze to wait for her, because dragons were not allowed inside the council chamber, and she walked through the massive doors carved with images of ancient battles and took her seat among the other dragon riders. General Marcus Hayes entered the chamber with his son and a dozen other human officers, and Kira had to admit they carried themselves well for such short-lived creatures because humans barely lived 80 years while elves counted centuries. And yet these humans walked like they owned the room. The head council elder stood and began speaking in the formal old language, but then switched to common tongue so the humans could understand, and she explained that the dark forces were too powerful for the elves to defeat alone, and an alliance was necessary. Kira shifted in her seat because she already knew all this, and wondered why they needed such a formal meeting just to announce a military alliance. But then, the elder said something that made the entire chamber go silent. The elder announced that to seal the alliance properly and combine their forces completely, they would implement an ancient tradition called a war bride lottery, where elven warriors would marry human soldiers and the bonds would unite their peoples. Kira felt her mouth drop open, and she looked around the chamber to see if anyone else thought this was insane. But most of the older elves were nodding like this made perfect sense, and she wanted to scream. The humans looked uncomfortable too, and she noticed the general's son had his jaw clenched tight, like he was trying not to argue, and Kira felt a tiny bit of respect for him, because at least someone else saw how ridiculous this was. The elder continued explaining that the lottery would happen immediately, and any unmated elven warrior between the ages of 100 and 300 was eligible, and Kira realized with horror that she fit exactly into that category. She stood up before she could stop herself, and her voice rang clear across the chamber as she said this was beneath their dignity as a species, and that marriage should never be used as a political tool. And besides, humans lived such short lives that any elf who married one would be a widow before they even reached middle age. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers, because no one interrupted the council elder during formal proceedings. But Kira did not care, and she kept talking and said that forcing people into marriages to seal alliances was something primitive species did thousands of years ago. The elder fixed her with a cold stare and asked in a voice sharp as broken glass if she had a better solution to unite their forces before the invasion arrived in 30 days, and Kira opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out because she did not have a better idea. That was when Luna's voice exploded into her mind with emotion so strong that Kira stumbled and nearly fell. And her dragon was sending images and feelings that made no sense, because Luna had never reacted this way to anything before. Kira tried to push back through their mental bond and ask what was wrong, but Luna just kept flooding her consciousness with a single overwhelming message, and it took Kira several seconds to understand what her dragon was trying to tell her. Luna had chosen a bond, and not just any bond, but a bond for Kira herself, and Kira's heart sank as she realized which direction the emotions were coming from, because Luna was focused entirely on the human general's son, who sat 3 rows away. She turned slowly to look at him, and found him already staring at her with brown eyes that held far more intelligence than she expected from a human. And then Blaze joined Luna in her mind, and both dragons were pushing the same message that this human was the one. Kira wanted to argue, but dragon bonds were sacred and absolute, and when a dragon chose a mate for their rider, the rider had to honor it or lose their connection with the dragon forever. And she had spent her entire life building her relationship with Luna and Blaze. The human stood up, and Kira watched him cross the chamber with movements that were surprisingly graceful, and when he reached her, he bowed in the proper elven fashion and spoke in perfect Elvish with only a slight accent. He introduced himself as Tyler Hayes, and said his dragons had told him about her pair, and Kira felt the world tilt sideways because humans could not communicate with dragons at all, and it was physically impossible according to every scientific study ever done. Tyler smiled at her shocked expression and explained quietly that his family carried a genetic mutation that allowed limited telepathic abilities, and his mother had been part of a secret government program studying psychic phenomena before she died. The council chamber had gone completely silent, and even the elder looked stunned, because if humans could bond with dragons, then every treaty and agreement they had ever made about species capabilities would need to be reconsidered. General Hayes stood and said in a firm voice that this was exactly why he had proposed the marriage alliance, because his people had been studying the elven dragon bonds for decades, and they had discovered that certain humans could participate in those bonds. Kira felt trapped and angry and confused all at once because 5 minutes ago, she had been mocking this entire program, and now her own dragons had volunteered her for it, and Tyler was still standing there waiting patiently for her response. She reached out carefully through the mental channel that Luna had opened and touched Tyler's mind, expecting to find something alien and strange, but instead she found warmth and curiosity and absolute sincerity about wanting to fight beside her. He let her explore his surface thoughts without any shields, and she saw memories of him watching her train her dragons from his ship's observation deck and studying elven combat techniques and learning their language. She asked him through the bond why he would agree to marry someone he just met, and his answer came back clear and honest that he had been preparing for this mission his entire life. And when he saw her flying with her dragons, he knew she was exactly the kind of warrior he wanted as a partner. The word partner stuck in her mind because he had not said wife or bride, but partner, like they would be equals, and Kira pushed deeper into his thoughts and found that he genuinely meant it. The council chamber felt too small and too hot, and Kira could feel every eye watching her as she stood facing Tyler Hayes, while her dragons pushed approval through their bond, and she wanted to run, but dragon riders did not run from anything. She pulled back from Tyler's mind and looked at the council elder, who was waiting with barely concealed impatience, and the whole situation was absurd. Because an hour ago, Kira had been planning her evening training session, and now she was supposed to agree to marry a human she did not know, but Luna and Blaze were absolutely certain, and their bond had never steered her wrong in 200 years. And when she looked into Tyler's eyes again, she saw something that surprised her, because he looked just as uncomfortable with this as she felt. That made her decision easier somehow, because at least they were both trapped in the same impossible situation. And she took a deep breath and said yes, in a voice that came out steadier than she expected. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers, and several elven council members stood up to object, but the elder raised her hand for silence and declared that Kira Moonwhisper and Tyler Hayes were now officially betrothed under the terms of the War Bride Alliance. Tyler offered her his hand in the human custom, and Kira took it, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers, and through their new mental connection, she felt his relief mixed with nervousness, and something else that might have been hope. General Hayes approached them with a smile that did not quite reach his eyes, and he congratulated them both and said they would have 20 days to prepare before the wedding ceremony, because the invasion fleet was projected to arrive in 30 days, and they needed the alliance sealed before then, 20 days to get ready to marry a complete stranger. And Kira wanted to laugh at how insane her life had become, but instead she just nodded and asked when they should begin coordinating their forces. General looked pleased by her practical question and said they could start immediately, and Tyler squeezed her hand gently and sent reassurance through their bond that they would figure this out together. The council dismissed everyone, and Kira walked out of the chamber with Tyler beside her, and she could feel the stares of every elf they passed because word was already spreading that a master dragon trainer had agreed to marry a human Luna, and Blaze were waiting in the courtyard, and both dragons immediately approached Tyler with curiosity, and Kira watched nervously because dragons could be dangerous to anyone they did not trust. But Luna lowered her great head and allowed Tyler to touch her scales. Blaze circled Tyler twice, and then bumped him with his nose hard enough to make the human stumble, and Kira opened her mouth to scold her dragon. But Tyler just laughed and scratched Blaze under the chin exactly where he liked it most. She asked Tyler how he knew where dragons liked to be scratched, and he explained that he had been studying dragon behavior since he was 12 years old, and he had always dreamed of meeting one in person, and now here he was, with two of the most beautiful dragons he had ever seen. The compliment made both Luna and Blaze preen, and Kira felt a smile tugging at her lips despite her confusion, because Tyler clearly knew how to handle dragons, and that was more important than she wanted to admit. Tyler suggested they go somewhere private to talk, and Kira agreed and led him to her quarters at the dragon training grounds, and the whole walk there she could feel curious eyes watching them, and she knew the gossip would be spreading through the city like wildfire. Her quarters were simple, with just a main room for living and eating and a separate bedroom and a large balcony where Luna and Blaze could land. And Tyler looked around with interest and commented that she kept her space very organized. Kira told him it was necessary when working with dragons because they responded better to handlers who maintained order in their own lives. And Tyler nodded like this made perfect sense, and she found herself relaxing slightly. They sat at her small table, and Tyler asked her to tell him about herself, and Kira was not used to such direct questions, but she found herself talking about her training and her dragons and her brother who had died 50 years ago when his dragon went mad. Tyler listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he shared his own story about losing his mother to a border raid and how he had spent his entire life preparing to protect others. And Kira realized they had more in common than she expected. He explained that his telepathic abilities had manifested when he was young, and his father had kept them secret because humans feared what they did not understand. And Tyler had learned to hide his gift until this mission, when it finally had a purpose. Kira asked him what it felt like to read minds, and Tyler said it was not exactly reading because he only sensed emotions and surface thoughts unless someone deliberately opened their mind to him like she had done in the council chamber. She tested their bond by thinking a question instead of speaking it, and Tyler's response came back immediately in her mind, and the connection felt strange but not unpleasant, and she wondered if this was what true dragon bonds felt like for riders who had been together for decades. Tyler suggested they should start training together so their dragons could learn to work as a team, and Kira agreed, because that at least was something practical she could focus on, instead of thinking about the wedding in 20 days. They went back to the courtyard, and Kira showed Tyler the proper way to mount a dragon, and he followed her instructions exactly and settled onto Blaze's back with surprising ease. And when they took to the sky, Kira felt her breath catch because Tyler flew like he had been doing it his whole life. Luna told her through their bond that Tyler had a natural gift for understanding dragon flight patterns, and Kira had to admit her dragon was right, because Tyler moved with Blaze like they had been partners for years instead of minutes. They practiced basic formations, and Tyler picked up the commands quickly and suggested several tactical modifications that actually improved their maneuvers, and Kira found herself impressed despite her determination to remain skeptical. After 2 hours, they landed back in the courtyard, and Tyler was grinning with pure joy, and he told her through their bond that flying with dragons was even more amazing than he had imagined, and Kira felt something warm spread through her chest at his happiness. General Hayes found them as they were putting the dragons away, and he told Tyler that the human forces wanted to meet his new partner, and Kira straightened her shoulders and agreed to attend, because avoiding her responsibilities would not make them disappear. The human ship was nothing like elven vessels, and Kira had to duck through doorways that were too low, and the metal corridors felt cold and lifeless. But the human soldiers greeted her with respect and genuine curiosity. Tyler introduced her to his command team, and they asked intelligent questions about dragon tactics, and Kira found herself warming to them because they treated her like a fellow warrior instead of an alien curiosity, one of the human pilots named Kate. Chen asked if Kira could teach them about dragon flight patterns, and Kira agreed, and spent the next hour explaining aerial combat, while the humans took notes and asked more questions. When they finally left the ship, Tyler told her she had impressed his people, and Kira admitted that they had impressed her too. And she had expected humans to be more primitive, but they were actually quite sophisticated in their own way. They walked back to her quarters as the sun set, and Tyler asked if he should find different accommodations. But Kira said he could stay in her main room if he wanted, because they were supposed to be getting married and they might as well get used to each other. Tyler looked relieved and grateful, and he set up a sleeping area in the corner, and Kira went to her bedroom but found she could not sleep, because her mind kept replaying the day's impossible events. Through their bond, she felt that Tyler was also awake, and after a few minutes she got up and found him sitting on the balcony watching the stars, and she joined him in silence. He said quietly that he knew this was not what she wanted, and he was sorry her dragons had pushed her into this situation, but he would do everything he could to be a good partner. And Kira surprised herself by saying that maybe her dragons knew something she did not. The next morning, Kira woke to find Tyler already awake and making breakfast in her small kitchen, and she stood in the doorway watching him move around the space with easy confidence, and wondered how her life had changed so completely in less than a day. He turned and smiled at her and offered her a cup of tea, and she took it and was surprised to find he had made it exactly the way she liked it, with honey and mint leaves. And she asked him how he knew, and he tapped his temple to indicate their mental bond. She sat at the table, and Tyler served her eggs and bread, and they ate in comfortable silence, and Kira found herself thinking that maybe this arrangement would not be as terrible as she had feared. After breakfast, they headed to the training grounds, and word had spread through the city about the human who could fly dragons, and dozens of elves had gathered to watch. And Kira felt nervous because her people did not accept outsiders easily. Tyler seemed unbothered by the attention, and he greeted Luna and Blaze with the same enthusiasm as the day before. And both dragons practically glowed with pleasure, and several watching elves gasped, because dragons rarely showed such affection to anyone except their primary riders. Kira decided to test Tyler properly, and she told him they would run the advanced combat course that she used to train elite dragon riders, and several elves in the crowd whispered that she was being too harsh, but Tyler just nodded and asked her to explain the course requirements. She showed him the aerial obstacles and the target dummies they would need to hit, and the complicated flight patterns they would need to execute, and Tyler studied everything carefully and asked several detailed questions about timing and coordination. They mounted their dragons and took to the sky, and Kira pushed Luna into a steep climb while calling instructions to Tyler through their bond, and she expected him to fall behind, but instead, he kept Blaze right beside them, matching every turn and roll. They dove toward the first set of targets, and Kira felt Tyler's mind working alongside hers as they coordinated their attack, and they hit every target perfectly and moved to the next obstacle without hesitation. The course normally took experienced riders 30 minutes to complete, but Kira and Tyler finished in 22 minutes, and when they landed, the watching elves were silent with shock, and then someone started clapping and others joined. One of the older dragon masters approached and told Kira that she had never seen such perfect coordination between two riders on their first real flight together, and Tyler must have been blessed by the ancient ones to fly so naturally. Tyler thanked her politely, and Kira felt pride flowing through their bond, because he had just earned the respect of one of the most difficult teachers in their training program. General Hayes arrived with several human officers, and he asked if they could observe the training, and Kira agreed, because the whole point of this alliance was to combine their forces, and that meant teaching humans about dragon combat. She spent the next few hours explaining dragon tactics to the human military leaders, and Tyler helped translate some of the more complex concepts, and together, they created a training program that would allow human pilots to support dragon riders in battle. Kate Chen suggested that they could use human aircraft to draw enemy fire, while the dragons attacked from above, and Kira had never considered using non-dragon aircraft in her battle plans. But the idea had merit. Tyler added that human ships could provide covering fire and supply drops that would let dragons stay in combat longer, and Kira found herself getting excited about the tactical possibilities, because combining their strengths could give them a real advantage. They worked through lunch, developing battle strategies, and by evening, they had created a complete combat doctrine that impressed even the skeptical Elven Council members who came to observe. Kira realized she had not thought about the wedding once all day, and when Tyler touched her arm and asked if she was ready to stop for dinner, she felt surprised at how quickly the time had passed. They returned to her quarters and Tyler cooked again, and Kira asked him where he learned, and he explained that his mother had taught him before she died, and cooking helped him feel close to her memory. Kira found herself sharing memories of her own mother, who had been a legendary dragon rider and had died defending a colony world 20 years ago, and Tyler listened and understood, because they had both lost people they loved to war after dinner. They sat on the balcony again, and Luna and Blaze settled on either side of them, and Tyler asked Kira to tell him about dragon bonds and how they worked. She explained that dragons chose their riders based on compatibility of spirit, and that the bond allowed them to share thoughts and emotions and coordinate in battle with perfect precision. And once a bond was formed, it lasted until death. Tyler asked if dragons ever chose bonds between riders, and Kira admitted that it happened. Rarely, but when it did, it meant the dragon sensed a deep compatibility between the two people, and such bonds usually resulted in the strongest combat partnerships. He was quiet for a moment, and then asked if she was angry that Luna and Blaze had forced this choice on her, and Kira thought about it honestly and said she had been angry at first, but now she was mostly curious. Tyler smiled and said curiosity was better than anger, and Kira agreed and found herself smiling back and through their bond. She felt his genuine affection for her growing, and she was surprised to realize she felt the same way. The next few days fell into a pattern of training during the day and quiet evenings together, and Kira found herself looking forward to their conversations and the easy partnership they were building. Tyler had a gift for understanding complex systems, and he helped her improve several training techniques, and Kira taught him advanced dragon communication, and they both learned from each other. On the fifth day, General Hayes announced that the Dark Forces had accelerated their timeline, and the invasion fleet would arrive in 25 days instead of 30, and that meant the wedding needed to happen sooner. Kira felt a flutter of nervousness, but Tyler took her hand and reminded her through their bond that they were already partners in every way that mattered, and the ceremony was just a formality. The Elven Council arranged for the wedding to take place in 3 days, and Kira had to meet with traditional ceremony planners who wanted to discuss flowers and music, and she felt completely out of her depth. Tyler rescued her by suggesting they keep everything simple and focus on the parts that actually mattered. And the planners were scandalized, but Kira was grateful because she had no patience for elaborate rituals. Kate Chen offered to help with the preparations, and Kira discovered that the human pilot had a talent for organization, and together they arranged a ceremony that honored both Elven and human traditions without being too complicated. On the night before the wedding, Kira could not sleep, and she found Tyler on the balcony again, and he admitted he was nervous too, and they sat together, watching the stars and talking about everything except the wedding. Tyler told her that whatever happened tomorrow, he was grateful for the chance to know her, and Kira surprised herself by saying she felt the same way, and through their bond, she felt his happiness and relief. Luna and Blaze settled around them, and the four of them sat in comfortable silence until the sun started to rise, and Kira realized that somehow in just a few days, Tyler had become someone she trusted completely, stood and offered her his hand and said they should try to get some rest before the ceremony. And Kira took his hand and let him pull her to her feet, and for just a moment they stood close enough that she could feel his warmth. Something shifted in the air between them, and Kira felt her heart beat faster, and Tyler looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. And then Luna nudged them both with her nose, and the moment passed. They went inside, and Kira lay in her bed thinking about how much had changed and how much more was about to change, and she wondered if she was ready. But then she felt Tyler's steady presence through their bond, and decided that maybe she was. The wedding ceremony took place at dawn in the Dragon Courtyard, with Luna and Blaze standing witness along with hundreds of elves and humans who had gathered to see the historic alliance sealed, and Kira wore traditional elven armor instead of a ceremonial dress because she was a warrior. First, Tyler wore his human military uniform with elven symbols embroidered on the shoulders, and when he walked across the courtyard to stand beside her, she felt nervous and excited and terrified, all at once. The council elder performed the ceremony in both Elvish and common tongue, and spoke about unity and strength and the bonds that connected all living things. And Kira barely heard the words because she was too focused on Tyler's steady presence beside her. When the elder asked them to exchange tokens, Tyler placed a traditional elven bonding crystal around her neck, and the clear stone felt warm against her skin, and she gave him a dragon scale pendant from Luna that shimmered with opalescent colors. The elder declared them married under the laws of both their peoples, and Tyler took her hand and squeezed gently, and through their bond. Kira felt his pride and affection, and something deeper that he was not quite ready to name Luna. And Blaze launched into the air and circled overhead, calling out in dragon song, and the sound echoed across the mountains, and other dragons from the training grounds answered, and the sky filled with the ancient melody. The celebration afterward was brief because everyone knew the invasion fleet was coming and there was still much work to do, and Kira and Tyler spent most of their wedding day in strategy meetings with military commanders from both species. General Hayes presented them with a joint command position that would let them coordinate dragon and human forces, and Kira accepted because she trusted Tyler's tactical mind, and he trusted her combat experience. That night they returned to their quarters that now officially belonged to both of them, and Tyler set up his belongings in the main room, while Kira watched from the doorway and wondered if she should offer to share her bedroom, but the words would not come. Tyler seemed to understand without her saying anything, and he told her through their bond that they could take things as slowly as she needed, and Kira felt grateful because everything was happening so fast, and she needed some things to stay familiar. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of training and planning, and Kira and Tyler worked 18-hour days preparing the combined forces, and their partnership grew stronger with each passing day. Kate Chen became Kira's friend and taught her about human culture and humor, and Kira introduced Kate to some of the younger dragon riders who were curious about humans, and slowly, the two peoples began to understand each other. Tyler's telepathic abilities grew stronger through his bond with Kira, and he discovered he could communicate basic ideas with Luna and Blaze directly, and the dragons were delighted to have another mind to talk to. On the 20th day, the warning sirens screamed across the city, and everyone rushed to their battle stations because the invasion fleet had arrived 5 days early, and they were not as prepared as they wanted to be. Kira and Tyler ran to the dragon courtyard and mounted Luna and Blaze and launched into the sky, along with 50 other dragon riders, and behind them came the human fighters and capital ships. The enemy fleet filled the sky like a dark cloud of metal and weapons, and Kira felt fear spike through her chest. But Tyler's calm determination flowed through their bond and steadied her. They led their forces into the first wave of combat, and Kira had trained for this her entire life, but nothing could have prepared her for the chaos of real battle with explosions and laser fire and screaming everywhere. Luna dove toward an enemy cruiser, and Kira directed her dragon's fire breath at the ship's engines while Tyler and Blaze attacked from the opposite side, and together they crippled the vessel in less than 30 seconds. The battle plan they had created worked perfectly, with dragons attacking from above while human ships provided covering fire, and together they were far more effective than either species could have been alone. Kira lost track of time as they fought, and she and Tyler moved as one being with their dragons, extending their coordination, and every time one of them was in danger, the other was there to cover them. An enemy fighter locked onto Luna, and Kira felt the warning spike through her senses. But before she could react, Tyler and Blaze were there, and destroyed the fighter with a burst of dragon fire. Through their bond, Tyler told her he would always protect her, and Kira sent back fierce gratitude and promised the same, and together they dove back into combat. The battle lasted 16 hours, and by the end, Kira's arms ached from holding onto Luna, and her voice was hoarse from shouting commands, but the invasion fleet was retreating and their forces had held the line. They landed on the command deck where General Hayes was coordinating cleanup operations, and Tyler dismounted from Blaze and reached up to help Kira down from Luna, and she leaned on him for a moment because exhaustion was hitting her hard. The casualty reports came in, and they had lost 12 dragon riders and 30 human pilots. And Kira felt each loss like a knife to her heart. But General Hayes told them it could have been much worse, and their coordination had saved hundreds of lives. Tyler led her back to their quarters and helped her remove her armor because her hands were shaking. too badly to work the buckles, and Kira realized she was crying and could not remember when the tears had started. He pulled her close and held her while she cried for the riders they had lost and for the horror of war and for everything that had changed in her life, and Tyler did not try to make her stop or tell her it would be okay. When she finally ran out of tears, she pulled back and saw that Tyler's face was wet too, and she realized he had been crying with her, and somehow that made her feel less alone. They sat on the balcony with Luna and Blaze and watched the sun rise over the battlefield, and the sky was full of smoke and debris, but the city was still standing. Tyler said quietly that he had never killed anyone before today, and Kira told him she had, and it never got easier. But you learned to carry it because the alternative was letting evil win. He took her hand and said he was glad he did not have to carry it alone, and Kira squeezed his fingers and agreed, and through their bond, she felt how much they had come to depend on each other. The council elder came to their quarters later that morning and said the enemy would likely attack again soon and they needed to keep preparing. But she also said that Kira and Tyler had proven the value of the alliance beyond any doubt. Kira asked if there were other humans with telepathic abilities who could bond with dragons, and the elder said they were already searching. Because if they could create more paired teams, like Kira and Tyler, they might actually have a chance to win this war. Over the next few days, they trained new teams and refined their tactics, and Kira found herself working alongside humans as easily as she worked with elves, and she realized her prejudices had been based on ignorance. Tyler's father came to thank her personally for protecting his son in battle, and told her that his late wife would have loved her, and Kira felt tears prick her eyes because she understood what a gift that statement was. That night, Kira found herself standing at the door to her bedroom, and instead of going inside, she turned to where Tyler was reading on the couch and asked if he wanted to watch the stars with her. They went to the balcony and sat close together, and Kira rested her head on his shoulder and felt his arm come around her waist, and through their bond, their emotions tangled together into something that felt like coming home. Tyler turned to look at her, and Kira saw her own feelings reflected in his eyes, and when he leaned forward, she met him halfway, and their first kiss was gentle and tentative and perfect. Luna and Blaze made happy rumbling sounds from their sleeping spots, and Kira laughed against Tyler's lips, and he smiled and kissed her again. And she thought that maybe her dragons had known exactly what they were doing. The enemy attacked 3 more times over the next month, and each battle was harder than the last. But Kira and Tyler led their combined forces with growing skill, and their success inspired other paired teams to form between humans and elves. Kate Chen bonded with a young dragon named Storm, and became one of the most effective human dragon riders. And she told Kira that watching her partnership with Tyler had shown everyone what was possible. The war changed both species in ways no one had expected, and humans learned patience and respect for nature from the elves, while elves learned innovation and adaptability from humans, and together they became stronger than either had been alone. Kira's relationship with Tyler deepened with each passing day, and 3 months after their wedding, she finally invited him to share her bedroom, and lying beside him that first night felt like the most natural thing in the world. Through their bond, their connection had grown so strong that sometimes Kira could not tell where her thoughts ended and his began, and Luna told her this was how the deepest dragon bonds felt, and that she and Tyler were truly matched. Seoul's General Hayes came to them one morning with news that they had captured an enemy commander, and during interrogation the prisoner revealed that the dark forces had been watching the elves for years and had attacked because they knew the elves were too proud to accept help from other species. The general said the enemy had not counted on humans being able to bond with dragons or on the 2 species learning to work together so effectively, and now the dark forces were reconsidering their invasion strategy. Kira felt anger burn through her chest because so many had died because of elven pride and stubbornness, and Tyler squeezed her hand and reminded her that they could not change the past, but they could shape the future. The council called an emergency meeting and announced that they wanted to extend the alliance program to other human colonies and potentially to other species as well. And Kira volunteered to help train new dragon riders from different worlds. Over the next 6 months, Kira and Tyler traveled to 5 different human colonies and helped establish dragon training programs, and everywhere they went, people were amazed by their partnership and wanted to learn. They met humans who had never seen an elf before, and elves who had never left their homeworld, and slowly the barriers between species began to break down as more and more people worked together. Tyler's telepathic abilities continued to grow, and he discovered he could sense the presence of other telepaths, even at great distances, and he found 12 humans across the colonies who had similar gifts and brought them to train with the dragons. Kira watched Tyler teach these new recruits with patience and skill, and she felt proud of how far he had come from the nervous young commander who had entered the council chamber 7 months ago. The enemy attacked less frequently as the Alliance forces grew stronger, and during the quiet periods, Kira and Tyler spent time exploring each other's cultures and learning about each other's pasts. Tyler taught Kira about human music and art, and took her to see the great museums on Earth where she stood in awe before paintings that were older than most elven settlements. Kira showed Tyler the ancient forests of her homeworld, where the trees sang in the wind, and the crystal caves where young dragons were born, and Tyler said it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. On the 1-year anniversary of their wedding, the council announced that the dark forces had retreated completely and were seeking peace. Negotiations and the war that had lasted 50 years was finally ending. The celebration lasted 3 days, and Kira danced with Tyler under the stars while Luna and Blaze flew overhead, and she thought about how much her life had changed since the day she had stood in the council chamber and mocked the lottery. She had been so certain that the Alliance was beneath her dignity, and that humans were inferior, and she had been so very wrong about everything. Tyler pulled her close and asked what she was thinking, and Kira told him the truth, that she had been a fool, but her dragons had been wise, and she was grateful every day that Luna and Blaze had chosen him. He laughed and said he had been terrified that day because he had known, the moment he saw her, that she was extraordinary, and he had been afraid she would reject the bond and he would lose his chance to know her. Kira kissed him and told him through their bond that she loved him more than she had thought possible, and Tyler sent back waves of love and happiness and contentment. The peace negotiations took months, but eventually a treaty was signed, and the dark forces withdrew to their own territory and agreed to leave the Allied worlds alone. General Hayes retired, and Tyler took over command of the combined forces, and Kira became the head of the dragon training program, and together they rebuilt what the war had destroyed. Kate Chen married an elven dragon rider named Finn, and they had a daughter who was the first child born to a mixed human and elf couple, and she had her mother's determination and her father's grace. More mixed marriages happened across the Allied worlds, and children born from these unions often had unique abilities that combined the best traits of both species, and people began to see the differences between species as strengths rather than weaknesses 5 years after their wedding. Kira discovered she was pregnant, and she was terrified because no one knew if human and elf biology were compatible enough to create children. But Tyler held her and promised they would face whatever came together. Their daughter was born healthy and perfect, with her father's brown eyes and her mother's pointed ears, and the ability to communicate with dragons from birth, and they named her Hope, because that was what she represented. Luna and Blaze adored Hope and appointed themselves her guardians, and the baby grew up learning to fly before she could walk and speaking to dragons as easily as to people. The council elder who had presided over Kira and Tyler's wedding came to visit when Hope was 3 months old, and she held the baby and said that this child represented the future, and that the old ways of separation and suspicion were dying. Kira looked at Tyler holding their daughter and talking to her in both Elvish and common tongue, and she thought about the girl she had been who stood in the council chamber and said marriage alliances were beneath her dignity. That girl had not understood that true dignity came from being willing to change and grow, and accept that you might be wrong about things you thought you knew for certain. Tyler caught her watching and smiled, and through their bond, she felt his love, and his pride in their family, and his hope for the future. And Kira sent back the same emotions amplified by her own fierce joy. Luna and Blaze landed on the balcony and peered through the window at Hope, and both dragons radiated satisfaction because their choice had led to this perfect moment. Kira went to the balcony and thanked her dragons for seeing what she could not see, and for choosing Tyler when she had been too stubborn to choose for herself. Luna touched her forehead to Kira's and sent images of the future with more children and more dragon riders and more partnerships between species that would make all their worlds stronger. The war had ended, But the alliance continued and grew and spread to other star systems and everywhere. The message was the same, that working together made everyone stronger, and that differences should be celebrated. Not feared. Kira and Tyler trained hundreds of paired teams over the years, and each one proved that the bond between species could be just as strong as the bond within species on their 10th wedding anniversary. They stood on the crystal cliffs where Kira had first seen the human ships arrive, and Tyler asked if she ever regretted saying yes that day in the council chamber. Kira laughed and told him she regretted being so stubborn before saying yes, but she had never regretted the decision itself. And Tyler pulled her close and said he had loved her from the moment he saw her flying with her dragons. They watched Hope playing with Luna and Blaze in the valley below, and Kira thought about how one choice made in anger and pride had changed everything. The lottery had seemed like a joke, and she had meant to mock it, but instead it had given her a partner and a love and a family and a future she never could have imagined. Tyler said quietly that sometimes the best things in life came from the moments when you were forced to let go of what you thought you wanted and accept what you actually needed. Kira agreed and added that sometimes dragons knew better than people, and Tyler laughed and said that was definitely true. The sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, and Kira leaned against Tyler and felt grateful for stubborn dragons and impossible lotteries and the human commander who had changed her entire world.